My name is Michael Levan. I'm going to do a little presentation. I'm going to hopefully, this is going to be more of like a hands-on. I know we have everybody in the room here, everybody that's remote as well. It'd be really cool if everybody could be hands-on. I'm going to go through just a few quick PowerPoint slides, and then what I did was I created a new project in Azure DevOps, and it's completely blank right now. Like there's nothing in it. There's no repos. There's no builds. There's no pipelines. There's no nothing. So we'll go through looking at the wiki. We'll go through looking at repos. We'll go through slightly looking at tickets. I don't want to bore anybody with tickets. And then we'll get to the good stuff, the CI, the CD portion, the build and release portion. So my name is Michael Levan. I'm a lead engineer on DevOps team. Work out of Jersey. I'm also author, blogger, and obviously somewhat of a public speaker. All right. So this is pretty much the tech stack that I'm working with right now. It's primarily Azure DevOps, Kubernetes and Docker Swarm, PowerShell, EasyCli, the entire .NET framework in general, configuration management, infrastructure as code with ARM, Azure Resource Manager, and then just distributed systems and microservices. So I've actually pretty much been in the Windows DevOps realm for probably 3 or 4 months. Prior to that, I was pretty much on AWS, Jenkins, wrote a lot of Python, wrote a lot of Ansible. So I kind of made this switch recently, and I started to really like it. I started to really enjoy it. In the beginning of my career, I was a Windows sysadmin, so I pretty much went from the Windows realm to the Linux realm, back to the Windows realm. And as I started to get more and more curious about DevOps with Microsoft tooling in general, we've seen a lot where over the past maybe 2 to 4 years, Microsoft has been really ramping up in general, with their DevOps practices, with what they're following, with their open source tooling, all these things. So does anybody not know who Donovan Brown is in this room? No? Yeah? Okay. So Donovan Brown, he made this quote, I think in 2015. He was a principal DevOps manager, and he just moved over to the Cloud Advocate team. So he made this quote: DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. And I think this is really important to bring up whenever I make these presentations, because I think that a lot of people assume that DevOps is just DevOps equals automation, right? Or DevOps equals specific tooling. And it really doesn't, right? If somebody says go build a house and you have a hammer and nails, who built the house, the hammer or the nails of the person? Obviously the person. And of course those tools help with wielding. You have to wield those tools to be able to build the house, right? But it's really the person, and that's what DevOps is about. It's about people. It's about culture. It's about bringing things together to ship a product and ship it faster, ship it quicker, and of course keep your productivity up and your product in general good, right? So these are the primary things that I'll talk about, minus this, because I couldn't get test plans working on my personal Azure account or my personal Azure DevOps account. So we'll go over boards in the wiki, we'll go over repos, we'll go over pipelines, and then as we go over pipelines, we'll be building an artifact. And that's it for the PowerPoint.
If the volume is good, should you maybe sit closer to that speaker?
Oh, sure, yeah.
There.
All right. Cool. So what I decided to do was I was originally just going to go over specific topics, but I figured it would be way more fun to just literally start a new Azure DevOps project. There's nothing in here. There's no repos. There's no boards. There's no nothing, right? So we'll start from scratch. As I'm going through this, I'll of course try to answer everybody's questions. If I don't have an answer to your question, I'll ping you guys on the side if you guys want to leave me your email, and I'll get those questions answered for you. Cool. So the first thing we'll essentially look at is the wiki. So if anybody comes from more of the AWS and Linux side of the house, right, you have multiple tools, right? You have, let's say, Jira for your ticketing. Let's say you have Confluence for your documentation, right? Let's say you have Jenkins for your CI/CD process. Let's say you have something like Nexus for your artifacts, right? These are all different tools, right? There's all different pieces all over the place, and those are things that if you're hosting on-prem, your infrastructure team has to manage those servers and those updates, and you of course have to manage the applications. The awesome thing that I really love about Azure DevOps, and I don't really think anybody else is doing this in this space except Microsoft, is they've just taken everything that you need and they put it into one place, right? Which is awesome. So the first thing we'll look at, right, is the wiki. So the wiki, if we can go in, we can create a project. Actually, I didn't test this, so I hope it works out good. So let's say, right, Microsoft panel. All right, documentation, testing, right, save this, all right, and obviously this is straightforward and easy. So at this point, you kind of have this one-stop shop to be able to write documentation, right? And this is obviously important for everybody in this room because, I can't remember what I ate this morning for breakfast, so I try to write everything down as much as possible, whether that's in OneNote, and then I share that with my team, or I share that with the, our global team and stuff like that, right? Within here, you can also set up certain permissions, right? So the really cool thing about Confluence and also in Wiki is that if there are certain teams and you want to be able to separate certain things, right? So you have documentation for IT, you have documentation for your developers, you have documentation for your infrastructure team or your infrastructure engineers, and then you have your DevOps documentation. Depending on who you want to be able to see that and who you want to be able to view that, you can set up permissions in here the same way that you can with other documentation tooling, right? So does anybody have any questions about that so far?
Like it's completely integrated with Azure Active Directory synchronization, right?
So yeah, you can set up like for your network security groups, right? So in AD, let's say you have Azure Active Directory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you definitely can set that up in here and you can integrate that in terms of your security groups and stuff like that. In terms of on-prem AD, I'm actually not sure. I know that the IT team in my organization, they're fully doing everything in Azure Active Directory. I think they've just pretty much moved everything over at this point. Because we're heavily invested in Microsoft, so like we don't have anything else except Microsoft products essentially. So yeah, in terms of like Azure Active Directory, you can definitely do that. In terms of on-prem, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I have a question.
Please.
Do you also have version control? You said you can put the documents here.
Mm-hmm.
Wiki, just like a version control
So
code?
yeah, so you have your version control via Azure repos. And yeah, we'll definitely.
Not for
get into
Wiki,
that as
but
well.
not, you said you can do the documents here. Do you have a
For
version
Wiki.
control, Wiki where you said over there?
For your documentation, that's a good question. I don't think that you have specific version control. Like, I've never seen the ability to be able to roll back on the wiki, if that's what you're more or less
Yes,
referring
right.
to. Yeah, in terms of like that type of version control, in terms of being able to roll back, I don't think so. I've never actually seen that or even tried it, to be honest. We could.
Yeah,
Let's
because
try
we
it.
do use Dax's code in our
Right.
a lot. We use Azure DevOps, Dax's code,
Right.
all our documentation, so we can roll back, see the changes. But
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, so
Okay.
I'm not sure about Wiki if you can do that.
So let's see. So we have one version, right? Spell today. So then if I save this, looks like you can.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like you have that type of source control in here. I don't know how long these will stay. Like I don't know if this is a forever thing or if it'll keep revisions for like 30 days or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting. I actually didn't know that until 3 seconds ago. So
Like, not to throw you under the bus, but just what would be curious then, can we do the pull request here in Wiki, right? That would be, I'm just curious again.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Never mind, let's park it.
We could definitely try it. I'm curious if I don't know. Because like I don't see any URLs that you can actually clone it and pull it down and make changes and push it up.
Maybe
I wonder. Yeah, I wonder if there's a way to link your wiki to your repos. That is a question that I will get back to you on because now I'm super curious
Awesome.
about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah. So Did anybody else have any questions regarding the wiki? Are we able to see questions through this actually? Maybe people are typing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know if I can see that.
Oh, thank you, Chad, for the question.
What was the question?
More people would like to know about the pull requests on the wiki.
Oh,
So
yeah.
get back to
No, that's awesome. That would be awesome if you could do that, right? Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing too is like in general source control, if I have something that I know that I don't want to change, if it's something that needs to be static, I'll write it in Azure repos, or if I'm sharing it with people, I'll write it in GitHub or something like that. So you obviously can do version control with documentation and stuff. I just don't know if you can do that right from the wiki, but I'll definitely get back to you guys.
Yeah, somebody asked to close the recording.
I'm sorry?
The recording message, I don't think we can minimize that.
Let me see if I can. No, I can't even like click it and move it. Sorry. Maybe this will help if I just.
Sorry, the recording message doesn't go away. So
Yeah, I don't know if that does that
You just
help?
have to, you have to open Teams and then close it in Teams.
yeah, no, we cannot. We don't have that option.
It's that center bar.
Yeah, I can't even click it.
Yeah, we don't have an option to click it over here.
I don't see something.
There's no X button here.
Yeah, sorry about that. Is it better if I keep my screen like this, that it's a little bit smaller, but you don't have to worry about looking at the recording thing? Is this better for everybody, or if I just keep it like this, or do you guys want me to remaximize it?
Yep, that looks good.
That's good. Cool. So obviously from your summary, right, you can invite certain people. You can make your project private or public. Right? Dashboards. So dashboards are interesting. Essentially with dashboards is if you just want to have like a one-stop shop to be able to view certain things about your projects based on builds, like, right? So you have build history, you have things like what you're assigned to, build usage, all of these things, right? So it's pretty interesting. We're obviously not going to see anything here because this is new. It's a new project, I mean, right? But if we wanted to go in here, wanted to configure this, right? I don't have anything in here to select because we haven't built anything yet. But I like to use this feature based on what repos and what code that I'm managing, how many times it's being built per day, what people are doing with it, especially in terms of like if we want to know that certain versions are being built or certain versions aren't being built, what branches are being built, things like that. I'll pretty much just put all this here, and this is for your view, right? So when you add things in here, it's not going to go to like everybody else that's signing into Azure DevOps or anything like that. It's just your personal view.
It's not like an agile board.
This? No, this is just more of like basic widgets if you want to see certain things. In terms of your agile board, we can go down to boards. Timing for that, right? So if you, in boards, it's pretty much just like a Kanban board, right? And you can set up sprints and things like that. So if you're used to like Jira, right, it's pretty much feels exactly the same. The only caveat that I don't like about boards is that if you have too many tickets, the tickets won't show up, and you either have to filter for them specifically, or you have to click on a little button that'll come down here and it'll say show more items. So that can be a little bit annoying, but besides that, yeah.
Can we import stuff from Jira?
I never tried importing things from Jira, but I know that there is an importing option.
So an import of
Yeah, for your work items.
Yeah, there you go.
No, okay, so you can import specific CSVs and stuff, but I don't know. I don't think you can import something specific for Jira. But I do know for Jira, if you have the cloud version, I know that you can get in contact with them, and I know that they'll export certain data for you if you need it. I think you could probably do it with the on-prem version as well. But yeah, I know that because I know at my previous company, we had to do that where we were moving ticketing systems, and we just had this huge export from them, and we were able to import. So, cool.
Where would you go about importing the I guess 80, I don't know, I saw it's like some ADO for import for work items.
Let's go back. Here?
It looks like, okay. All right.
Yeah, so this just looks like it's essentially like a CSV.
Okay.
I don't know if there are any other options. No, doesn't really look like it.
All
That
right.
might be the only thing that they have at this time. Cool. So obviously you have your filters here if you want to toggle on or off. So creating a new work item, right, based on if you need an epic, an issue, or a specific task. Your boards, and this is pretty much what I live in, right? This is just like your standard Kanban boards, right? So you can assign people tasks here. You can filter based on your tickets, based on different types, based on different tagging, stuff like that. So if you have multiple boards or you have multiple projects going on in your development teams, you can just segregate those things the same way you can with other ticketing systems as well. So just to give everybody a brief overview.
Can we customize the swim lanes? Do you have often?
Yeah. So you can actually, here, if I go into here real quick, I'll show you something that's a little bit more customized. I think it's this project. Yeah, so like you can customize your columns and stuff. Like I just made this for Dev, UAT, things like that. The different tagging here, so you can like color and customize your tag stuff as well. None of it comes out of the box though. Like you have to actually go in and you have to create your tags and you have to create your columns and things like that. Pretty much just out of the box standard is is just this guy here. All right. So you have your work items, you have your boards. If you want to go in here, you can write your description, your discussions, all of that. Something that's quite interesting to me, and again, right, this is because everything is integrated into one place, right, in Azure DevOps. So you can link commits, you can link pull requests, you can link branches, you can create branches, right? So the really awesome thing too is like you can link everything right to your ticket. So if somebody's going in, right, like let's say you're a global company and you're 14 hours ahead of that person. When you're sleeping, that person's awake and they want to go in and they want to see where you are with your sprint, or they want to see where you are with this ticket, right? Or if your boss is halfway across the world and they need to see what's going on, you can pretty much link everything here, all of your commits, all of your code, everything, so they can see where you're at that time. The other cool thing too is when you create pull requests in Azure DevOps, you can set it up in a fashion that you must link a work item, right? So if you're merging or if you're creating a pull request to go into master, you can set it up in such a way that anybody that's going to commit to master must have a work item associated with that pull request. If they don't have it, it'll fail. Like they won't be able to complete the pull request. People will be able to approve it, but they won't be able to actually go in and merge to master. So, sorry, go ahead.
To add members to the team.
Add members. So, project settings, teams. You can add new teams here. So here you'd be able to add members. I'm obviously the only one because this is my personal Azure account. But you can go in here, you can add either teams or you can add specific members to your teams. Something to keep in mind with this too, if you're going in and you want to play with this at work, you have to be the overall administrator, like the global administrator of Azure DevOps. There's certain layers of different types of administrators, right? But if you don't have that access, you probably won't be able to go in and do this, depending on your access level.
Just an example. If I want to work in this project right now.
Right now?
What
Yeah.
do you have to do?
It's a good question. I don't know if I can add outside.
Like a guest
Create a
account?
guest account?
You should.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should.
Create a guest
do it,
account.
yes.
Yeah.
So let's see. I've never tried to add anybody
Yeah,
out of the
Azure AD.
organization. I don't. Probably need Azure AD, right? Let's see. Those are good questions. Please, if anybody has any questions about this, please keep them coming because I'm learning with you guys right now.
does it need to be an org admin or a project admin will also do?
I'm sorry?
Does it have to be an org admin or?
Yeah, and or the project admin in terms of your project that you're setting up. So right now we're in the Microsoft presentation project, and then this one is like the Azure DevOps recipes project. So there's an overall like Azure DevOps for the global administrator, and then for specific projects there are administrators as well, yeah, which are called project administrators. I feel like you definitely can add guests because I know we have consultants. Let me see. See if I can just like do a random email. See what it does. It's thinking. Maybe I don't know. Oh, there you go. Okay, cool. Yeah. So if the person doesn't come up, probably what's happening is it's either going to Azure Active Directory or Office 365, however you're integrating, and it's looking to see if that person exists in your overall organization. If they don't, you just looks like it's pretty easy to do that. And whoever has that email just got an invite.
But Mike, actually, what would be cool, can we get this guest account and promote as administrator for that workspace?
Yeah, sure. I probably need like a real account.
Send it to me.
Yeah? Go ahead, type in your email.
I noticed that you can connect to GitHub, but Azure also keeps tracks of all your changes. So why would you want to connect to your GitHub accounts? Is it to publish your work or?
Yeah, so that's actually interesting considering Microsoft bought GitHub. So I don't know.
Another thing.
So I don't know if either. I don't know. I have theories, but I'm thinking like maybe they'll remove Azure repos and they'll just go GitHub, right? Because why are they going to have two different source control systems? Unless maybe they'll move one to SVN and the other one they'll keep as a distributed version control. I'm not sure, yeah. But in terms of being able to connect in other places, so Azure DevOps, right? Azure is in the name, but it's not just for Azure. I can connect builds or I can take code from, let's say if I want to deploy to Jenkins or I want to deploy to things in AWS or I want to deploy to things to on-prem in like my ESXi environment, I can do all that right from Azure DevOps. So it's completely open in the sense that you don't have to just be using Azure to do it.
That's great.
Yeah, it's just in the name. So once we get to the repo section, I'll show you guys. But you can set up and where you're pulling your code from. You can say you're pulling from GitHub, or if you're pulling from a different version control system like GitLab, you can connect that in as well. Yeah, even like if, let's say, you want to work with Docker images, right? And let's say you're not using ACR, which is Azure's registry, and you say you're using Docker Hub, right? You can connect to Docker Hub as well. So it's not just tied into specific Microsoft products for any means. Yeah.
I tried this approach and I got an email.
Yeah, I haven't gotten an email
You
either.
get the email?
But that happens sometimes.
Oh, that's unfortunate that happened.
Well, I mean, you can definitely work with people from different organizations, not
Yeah.
Microsoft, because customers, they
When I
have.
did it, I had to do it by organization setting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I did admin tune DevOps, and then I went down to the bottom org settings and then users.
Are
and
you
then
see the
you-
project?
Yeah, I'm able to log in as the user that was given access.
Oh, cool. So you got it even with
Yeah,
that?
I'm
Okay,
in,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So it looks like there's a few different ways then, right? We can either do it like this, or you can do it from this specific project. So probably what happens is if you do it at the organization level, they'll be able to see all projects, versus if you do it at the project level, they can just see one. So if you just click on Azure DevOps in the left-hand corner, can you see any of the other projects? Yeah, so that's the. Oh yeah, because that one's open as well. I have that open to the world.
Yeah.
So you could just see the one that you have specific access to, but not the other ones. That's interesting.
Can you promote him as administrator?
Yeah, let's see. Yep, change access. Let's go.
It sounds yeah.
Stakeholder means.
I think it's in a. I think that part's in a different place.
Let's see. Sounds like you're gonna pay for half of my Azure account. Let's see. No, that's not what I want. I want to be able to do, oh, member of. Let's say. Cool. So
Yeah.
now you should have that access.
So now I will go ahead and delete project.
Let's see something now. Organization.
How much does it cost all of this, that DevOps?
Azure DevOps is free for up to 5 projects. Yeah, 5 projects. Or is it 5 users or 5
Users,
projects?
yeah, you can invite
Yeah.
5.
Got it. You can have, I'm sorry?
Unlimited Visual Studio subscribers and
Okay.
some limit for stakeholders, but 5 for basic.
5 for basic. Okay. Yeah. So and I know there's like there's a cap on how many projects you can have. But then at the same time, I think you can add multiple organizations. Like I've had multiple organizations and I've never gotten charged extra.
The other catch actually, when you execute your project, it's only one execution. You can do it at that. Like if you have like multiple projects, multiple 5 users,
Right.
you have to be in the queue to get the job triggered.
Yeah. So even if you have like let's say 3 to 4 builds kicking off, if you're using the Microsoft hosted agents versus like because you can have your own on-prem agents, like you can have like Jenkins build slaves and stuff like that. If you don't and you use the specific ones Microsoft hosted agents, you have to wait. Like I've noticed that if there are 3 or 4 builds kicking off at work, and I kind of just have to sit there like you can't do anything about it. As far as I know, I don't know if there's a tier up in terms of cost, but that might just be it if you're using the Microsoft agents.
Just while we're on the topic of the Jenkins,
Yeah.
Mike, why would I ever want to go to the marketplace and add Jenkins to Azure DevOps?
So, I've seen it once, and pretty much what it is let's say you're trying to migrate, right? Like for example, I know my buddy is actually going through this right now where they're migrating a lot of their workloads from Jenkins to Azure DevOps, but half of the organization is staying on Jenkins, half of the organization is going to go to Azure DevOps. So if you want to be in Azure DevOps and you still need to deploy to say for this team, you would want to deploy to Jenkins and vice versa. I'm 90% sure there's a plugin in Jenkins for Azure as well, if you want to deploy. So I think it's more of like a cross-project, cross-platform, cross-organization, depending on what parts of the organization are using.
It's only for the migration purposes, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, and in terms of using both, I mean, it's more of like an organizational, decision. Yeah. Cool. All right. Everybody's questions were answered in terms of the permissions. These are awesome questions, guys. Please keep them coming.
Quick question on the pricing. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yep.
Hey. Oh, okay. Someone already posted the link. Thank you.
Oh,
I was
nice.
asking a link to the pricing scheme that you just discussed.
Oh, perfect. Cool.
Thank you.
So that. Awesome. So. All right. So now we're off to repos. So your repo, it's just a distributed version control. To my knowledge, I don't think Azure Repos has anything in terms of like SVN or anything like that. I think it's all distributed version control.
So what's the difference between GitHub and repo?
The difference between GitHub and Azure Repos? No, nothing. It's just different platform. Well, I guess technically not a different platform anymore, but in terms of like where you're going and where you're storing your code and stuff like that, they're both cloud-based, right? Or like something like GitLab, for example, you can have on-prem servers, you can store your code on-prem. So yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. It's all distributed version control. Yeah. It's just one thing I'd like to point out is you can definitely add GitHub as an extension, right? Or it's not even an extension, like it's more built in now, right? But you can add it in such a way where all of your builds, all of your releases, so your releases can talk to your artifacts, everything can be from GitHub, right? I think people probably just choose Azure Repos because it's right there. You know what I mean? So again, it goes back to like the how many platforms do you want to manage versus everything's here in quote unquote single pane of glass, right? Cool. So, before I go on, because I mentioned SVN twice, does anybody have any questions about SVN versus distributed version control.
What does SVN stand for?
SVN is, I forget what SVN stands for. SVN is, does anybody remember?
Centralized.
Centralized, thank you.
Central.
So pretty much what it means is with SVN, you have one repo, let's say it's up in the cloud, right? Or it's on-prem somewhere, right? It's pretty much for larger repos. So let's say you have a repo of like 300 gigs, right? What happens with distributed version control is when you clone it down, that means you would have to essentially clone down almost 300 gigs, right? With SVN, it's just one location that you're hitting and that you're working with. Now, on the flip side of that, you and I couldn't work on it together and push it and merge it together. So if one person's in it, one person's in it. So that's kind of the pros and cons. I think the biggest pro at this point with SVN is that you don't want to, if you have two repos that are 300 gigs and you got to pull that down, it's, you know what I mean? So I also see a lot of banks using SVN as well because their repos are super huge. Yeah.
It gives you more management control, right?
Not more management control, more of like a centralized control. I don't think that I would call it management control because with distributed version control, like you have just as much management in terms of how you're controlling your code, what you're doing with pull requests, what people can access, what if people can create certain branches or merge certain branches or things like that. So yeah, I would say more of like a centralized type of control. Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem. Let's go.
Does SVN have a staging area and stuff? If you're using SVN, does it also come with the staging area and stuff?
Staging area in terms
In
of
GitHub, you have that the staging area, right?
yeah. It would depend on your provider. I honestly don't work with SVN. There are multiple different SVN providers, but I don't really work with them to know if it's like anything specific like GitHub or anything like that. Yeah. Yeah, I would say I don't really know anybody that works with SVN unless they're working at like very large banks or very, very large code bases. Like I'm sure Microsoft works with SVN in certain places. Like I would assume like the Windows 10 repo, right? Maybe SVN. Because it's obviously a huge code base. Clone this down, right? And this is pretty much like the same thing as GitHub, right? You either have an SSH or you have HTTPS. I'll just clone it down with HTTPS. Sorry, I need to minimize.
If it's not gonna take us off track, could you show us how to generate the SSH? Let's see if I want to authenticate from your machine and clone it with SSH key.
Right. Let's say.
If it's too much, then
No, I might just have to create an SSH key for this. Yeah. So what I'm gonna have to do is let me just throw an SSH key up here. Let me just generate something real quick. Sorry, I keep losing my mouse on the team screen. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this in.
instead of HTTPS, we're gonna connect with SSH key, so more secure way. And it's also good, let's say if you have a proxy and you're trying to authenticate, and now you have to authenticate through the proxy. Whereas if you do an SSH, then you can just pretty much get in and clone your repo. Mike, am I correct, right?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Sorry, yeah, just to repeat a bit louder. Let's say in our case, we have like proxy, right? And there's always a challenge. You can't access some of the repos with HTTPS. So the workaround is to use exactly SSH authentication and download it this way.
Yeah, if your organization is blocking like inbound HTTPS for whatever reason, like so let's say you're on like a VPN or something like that, right? And on the VPN link, they're blocking 443 for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That's another good way to do it as well. The only thing is though is like you have to manage those SSH keys, right? So if you're doing it just from an SSH perspective and like I don't have your key, you're not accessing the repo. So that's the pros and cons. Yeah. So let's do like I have to specify.
Yeah, maybe we should move on if it's not,
Yeah, if it's a big deal, yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's up to you guys. I could keep going with it. Yeah.
No,
can
we're
come back
good.
to it.
Cool.
That was good.
Let's look
to
at the
learn.
pipeline. Can't wait for the pipeline.
Perfect. Cool. So let me just.
And it's a good thing to know.
Yeah.
So this is obviously blank right now. What I'm going to do is I created a little web app, and I wrote some ARM templates that what we'll do is we're going to commit a web app, and we're going to commit ARM templates to have the ability to create the web app in Azure, and then we'll push our web app out.
Nice.
You gonna put it on the master branch?
Yeah, you want to see how to?
I
create
want to see
separate
how
branches?
you're gonna do the. You're gonna create another branch, but what I would love to see, me personally, if you guys support it as well, do the versioning as well. Can you do the version?
Yeah, that's cool. I could do that. I could do pull requests. Show you.
Don't mind? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Andre, would you like it?
Let me just, I'm gonna do something that nobody should do and just copy and paste code over to this folder. It's terrible, yeah.
We shouldn't do that.
No, you shouldn't do that. That's why source control exists.
But deployment of the manager function.
Don't do it, man. Alright. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. Just need to remember where I saved this. Okay. So now we have our code base, right? Simple web app, and this is just like a boilerplate C# web API from Microsoft. Nothing specific. On that, right? So just basic, simple web app. This is our ARM template. Has anybody not worked with ARM? So I can just do like a quick overview of what this even is. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So essentially, you have 2 files. You have your parameters, which is, you're essentially passing this in at runtime like any other programming language. You can set up all your parameters here.
Excuse me, in this ARM template, you define, what exactly you define, the infrastructure or?
It really depends. So you can define infrastructure, you can define storage accounts, you can define Azure function apps, you can define web apps. You can define resource groups.
So you define the
VMs.
environment.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's just like software-defined infrastructure, like Ansible, Terraform, whatever. Yeah. Right. So we'll just define this here, right? Go back to our main template. So we have one parameter here, and then just have our SKU. This is for our Azure App Service Plan. I'm going to turn it to F1. That's the free one. Fun fact, the free Azure App Service Plans only work on Windows right now, not on Linux. So if you're spinning up a Linux workload, you'll have to use something paid. And then this is just the default value that it's going to get our resource group location. So you have your variables here, right? So I like to use variables if I know that I'm not gonna want to go in and change the value. So ideally, your main template, you never really want to go in and you want and touch it. You pretty much just want to go in and edit your parameters, and then your main template should be for if you're spinning up an IIS infrastructure, or you're spinning up some sort of databases, right? Your main template is pretty much just to define your infrastructure, and then your parameters are what you want to pass in. If I want to define anything specific in variables, I'll probably just define, say, some name, right? Some random generated value hyphen web app, right? Or hyphen resource group. So I know that it's always different, but I always have something to go back to and be like, oh yeah, that's where this was created.
Can you compare the ARM template to Terraform?
Yeah.
Keep it, because we have a lot of people on the call, keep it to the DevOps topic.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah.
So we can talk about this after the meeting.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to actually remove this in hopes that nobody took my web app name. Because web app names, they have to be unique because they're. I just need to remove that because they're public, right? So they can have a public DNS, which means you can't have the same one as somebody else has for obvious reasons. So that's our web app name, right? So again, our web app name is Levan Web App 92, and then we're just passing in our web app name. And then we have our resources here. So our resources are what we're going to be using to define our infrastructure.
You need to remove the square bracket in the web app portal name.
Oh, yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
No, wait.
You need to have two.
No, yeah. Should be like that. There we go. Okay. Nope. Wait.
So you have an extra.
There's in.
I have an extra one?
Parameter stars. Parameters.
So there's.
Where is it?
In parameters, there's parentheses right over there. I'm not sure you need another one, or you just delete it.
There we go. Thank you. Cool. So now we have our resources, and our resources are what we're going to define to spin up our infrastructure. So all of these types here are just specific API calls. So this is an API call for your app service plan. This is an API call for your actual web app. And then as you can see here, we're passing in our variable for our app service plan name, which is being defined here. And then, yep. Does anybody have any questions regarding this? This is like just a super small template. You can have these essentially as big as you want. You can define these for your network, the VMs that are going to be sitting on the network, the storage accounts, everything. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions about like?
Just having like placeholder for variables, and you have a file which has the values for those placeholders, and then it's just a mapping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's no specific. I wish there kind of was, to be honest, but there's no specific type of template for your variables. Like I wish I could define my parameters, my variables, and then my infrastructure. But yeah, you could just pretty much define your parameters in like a separate place right now. Yeah. I don't know if that'll change or not, but cool. So can't see the X. Okay, cool. So yeah, and then so what we'll do is, because you wanted to see branching structures. Oh. Right. So right now nothing's committed, right? So first what we'll have to do is we'll commit to master, and then we'll go and we'll create a new branch and check out.
Like, I understand how, I mean, it's good that you're going to show us from the Git. Mm-hmm. Can you do it from the portal, from the Azure DevOps portal? Mm-hmm. You can create the branch. Can you create the version?
Yeah. So once something's committed, like it's going to look like how it looked like with like, hey, there's nothing here right now. Yeah. But once something is committed, you can pretty much do everything from there. You can edit code, add code.
Can you show it?
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as, when I commit this, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. So do a git add to stage our environment. Commit up. Code. All right. Do git push origin master. Before I do this, I just want to show you guys. There is a git extension for VS Code, and you can essentially do everything from here as well. So you could commit, you could push, you can pull, You can check out to specific branches, publish new branches, all of that. If you're not comfortable with the Git command line. Oh, sorry.
Hey, quick question on the topic of extensions.
Sure.
General question. So I found a lot of good looking stuff on the marketplace, but I don't know. I'm hesitant because I don't know where they come from. As in, are they safe to be used? I mean, as Microsoft, we manage a lot of confidential data, and we don't want an app that has like a backdoor somewhere. Do you have any experience? Like, do you even ever worry about that, or everything that on the marketplace is safe?
No, I mean, definitely you can't think everything on the marketplace is safe, right? We like to think so, but at the end of the day, I don't know the implementation in terms of like what somebody has to do to push something, right? Like I don't know if it's like, for example, with iOS when you have to be have a third-party digital signature to push an app, right? I don't know if you have to do anything like that to push the app to VS Code. I've never personally seen that before. In terms of what extensions are safe, I unfortunately can't answer that. I could tell you the three that I use that I haven't had an issue with. Those are just the standard Git one, Git blame, which is you can show by every line of code who wrote that code, which is very handy in some cases. And then there's something called Git lens, and Git lens is everything from like your history to your Git status to what commits haven't been done. I think, yeah, I have Git lens here. So you could pretty much see everything, your history, your file history, your repos, your branches. This is a really cool one. I use this a lot because I pretty much like live in VS Code and Git at this point. So yeah, I use this one a lot. So I would say the standard Git blame, Git lens, those are the only ones that I've tried to really use and see what was out there. But obviously like there are a ton of different ones, right? And then if I go to like this person, like I don't know who this is, right? I mean, there's 4.5 stars and there's 139,000 downloads. So I would hope that at some point somebody would say something. But yeah, does that answer you? I feel like that was a long-winded answer to your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, perfect. So we'll check our status again. Our branch is up to date. Now, let's go back. Let's refresh. This will answer your question. So once we refresh, now we have our repo here, right? We have our repo, we have our branch, we have our code, right? So this is everything that we were looking at previously. Here's our commits, right? So if you want to see history of something, you would be able to see it here. You'd be able to see all the versions, and not only the versions, but you would be able to see like who committed what they said. Your names are there, all those things. Yeah. There's the Azure Repos VS Code extension, which helps a lot with that as well. Yeah. And there's an Azure DevOps extension as well that you can take a look at. So I will leave it up to you, sir. Do you want me to create the branch here, or do you want me to do it through Visual Studio?
I would go from the portal.
Beautiful. All right. So
sorry, can I ask you to do this in both, like in VS Code and portal? Good.
Yeah, I can do that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks.
So create
two branches, right?
Yeah, 2 branches. Yeah. So we'll do testing 1, right? We're going to base this off of master. We can't base it off of anything else right now because there are no other branches. And then if we had work items, like I said, you could connect those here. So, and again, which is really cool, right? So everything is integrated. As I keep saying, if you even want to create a new branch, you could give somebody a reason why, right? Which is awesome. So, sorry about that. Go back. Branch.
Like it could be me. I'm just going to talk in parallel. But you see right now, when you're going to create this branch, you're creating the branch. You cannot attach the version for that branch. Version for the branch, like V1, V2, and stuff like that. You could do it from the GitHub, from the Git.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. That's what you were referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
the lack, or it's me missing because I couldn't find it personally.
No, I've never seen, like, I've done it in GitHub, but I've never personally seen it with Azure Repos, like for specific versions. Now, if you want to do something for specific versions, what I do is I'll do feature right? And then whatever my feature is. So if I want to, it's not as good as having 1.0.0, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, typically when you have your versions like 1.0.0, those are typically handled in your artifacts. So let's say like you have two versions of your application and you push your code and you build your code and it goes to your artifacts, you would pretty much usually have your like your versions.
Numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
Because I've never seen it done like in terms of versioning repos. I've never seen it done in production in that way. And I have to imagine, I mean, I have repos that have like 60 different branches, and to have to manage all of those versions, I personally wouldn't want to do that anyways.
I guess where I'm going with this stuff, so just for the rest people would catch up with me too, right? Let's say we have dev, seed, UAT, and prod,
Sure.
right? I might have multiple dev environments, right? I don't want to call them dev 1, dev 2, dev 3, right? I want to go with the versions. And then if disaster recovery comes, I go to the disaster recovery version, revert it back with.
Right. So to handle something like that, this is just an idea, right? This is kind of what I do is if I know that I'm going to have multiple different dev stages, or I know I'm going to have multiple different UAT stages. So our whole idea, right, is you have dev, you have UAT, and you have prod. Your dev should hopefully be down 90% of the time, because that means your developers are testing and pushing and writing code, right? Your UAT environment is typically your staging environment where you're like, hey, okay, now I'm ready to maybe sort of go to prod. Let's have QA look at some of these bugs here. Then your prod is obviously production environment. If I know I'm going to have multiple, or I'm testing in multiple different code bases, you can set up more than one stage in Azure DevOps where you could have like a dev 1, a dev 2, a dev 3, a UAT 1, UAT 2, UAT 3, and then obviously your production base. So you can have your stages set up in that way if you would like to. Yeah. So it might be a little bit hard to manage that, but at the end of the day, yeah.
It's all cosmetics at the end of the story, yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, yeah, that's pretty much all it is. Cool. So create this branch, right? So now we have our branch. We have our master branch, and we have our testing branch. Now let's go back to VS Code. Projects. Cool. So now if we run git branch, we have master, right? We do git pull. All right, up to date. We do git branch again, right? So we still have our one branch. So now what happens if we want to see two branches, right? We have to do git checkout. That's what I named it. Okay, so now git branch again, and now we have our testing branches, the one we just created. So let's say we want to create a new testing branch, but we want to create it in VS Code. Do git checkout -b testing 2. Do git branch, simple as that. So it's a little bit easier in code, right? Yeah.
And you need to push it to repository?
In terms of pushing into a repository, let's go back. Let's refresh. We have our testing 1 branch. Go here. Let's make a change. Let's do. Actually, I don't want to make a change to this because I'm scared that it's not going to build. But let's do. I think we're going to have to make a change. So let's just go.
You could add a comment.
But you just created a additional branch that you actually don't see in the portal.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
You cannot push it without making any changes to this branch?
Yeah, so what happens is when you create a new branch, right, everything is local at this point and it's sitting on your local machine. Once you make a change, at that point, you'll be able to push your change up. But if you don't have any changes, I mean,
So
you
branch
could
actually
push
is not
up.
change in terms
I'm
of
sorry?
branch is not change in terms of VS Code. It does not recognize it as a change when you
Well,
create
it's
a new
not
branch.
so it's not a change to code.
Okay.
Is that I'm sorry, am I not answering your question properly?
Yeah. Okay, got it.
Okay. So then we made our change here, right? And we'll do push origin testing 2. So let's go back. Let's go here, and we should be able to refresh, and hopefully this went well. Now we have our testing 2 branch, right? But where is... Did I not save that? No, I didn't. I'm sorry. Okay, so let's go back.
You actually was able to push the branch without this change. So you actually you can remove this file.
I'm sorry. That was your question. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Yeah, you can always push like as many new branches as you want. It'll still come up as a change, but it won't be a code change. It'll just be the specific
just
branch.
the additional branch. Okay.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize. I misunderstood.
That's fine. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So then we don't even need this here, so we don't have to worry about that. Anyways, I didn't push it up because I didn't stage it or commit it. Cool.
One question.
Please.
So if we have to sync, right? I mean, the branches, for example, now you have testing 1 and master. So if you had to sync from testing to master or master to testing, how do you do that? Is that possible?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. It's called git merge. So I can show you guys. Let me create. I'm gonna create a testing file in master. So I'm gonna do git branch. Oh, sorry. Git branch. Git checkout master. All right. I'll go up here and create. Oh, because I didn't save it. Okay, perfect. So then if I do git add, git commit, testing txt, git push origin master. So now, and this is actually a really good point to bring up. And if you're working with source control, and you're working with multiple developers, you're going to see this a lot, because what happens is, let's say you're working on a feature, right? And as you're working on that feature, another developer is working on another feature, same branch, right? Same code base, and they make a PR, a pull request, and their pull request gets approved, and they push it into master, right? So now, once you have created a new branch off of master, you're technically talking to the old master, right? Because there's a new one. So 2 things are going to happen. 1, you're obviously not going to have the newest code. 2, you're going to have conflicts, right? Because it's the master branch where the actual centralized master branch is and the one local are different. So you're going to have merge conflicts. So let's go back to VS Code. All right. So still in master, right? So now let's do git checkout testing 1, and keep your eyes on the left side of the screen where the test.txt is, right? So now this goes away. Why does this go away? Because we're on a new branch, right? So it's a completely separate code base at this point. Well, not a completely separate code base, but where your code is living, it's completely separate, right? So now, let's say that you're a developer and you're like, oh, somebody pulled something or somebody committed something to master, right? So the first thing, actually, let's go back and we'll check out master, right? First thing you want to do is you want to do a git pull. So we obviously don't have any changes, but your git pull is going to say, go out to master, everything that has changed, pull this down for me, right? Then you're going to go back to your feature branch, right? And now we're here, our test.txt file isn't there. We're going to do a git merge from master. And now our test.txt is there. So really good question. Thank you for bringing that up. Anytime that you're pulling any code, if it's the first time you're doing it or it's the second day or the third day, you always want to pull from master and you always want to merge it into your branch, because you're going to have merge conflicts once you create a pull request to merge your code into master. Does that make sense to everybody?
Thanks for explaining.
Cool. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for the question. All right. So, actually, I don't want to. I'm going to go back. Check out master. Let's go. Let's delete this. So I'm 100% sure. Do git add. Commit. Deleting. Tasks. Cool. All right. So, does anybody have any questions about version control, source control before I move on to the builds?
All good.
Okay, cool. So, all right, so let's go through the process, right? Now we have our code up on Azure repos. So our code is there, it exists, but it's not an artifact yet at this point. It's not built. There's no CI in place. So let's go to our pipelines. Actually, I'm gonna switch this. So while I'm switching this, I'm turning off multi-stage pipelines. If you know what multi-stage pipelines are, what it essentially is you can have all of your code in YAML, or your whole build, right? And then at that point, once you build, you can do something called stages, which is your dev, test, UAT, prod, right? I don't have that set up in the demo right now, so I don't want to mess that up. But if you guys are interested,
can you show again how you turn it off? Because I actually turned it
Oh, yeah.
on and I could not find how to turn it on.
oh
Okay.
yeah,
Don't
so there used to be a previews button here, and then Microsoft hit it, and now it's in here. So
Okay.
it's like
Okay.
that three dots, yeah, and then you can turn it off in there at that point.
I can, while we're on this perspective, right? I know when you build your pipeline with the YAML file, you have to turn this on. But can you explain more? What would be another reason? Like, why would you have it on?
Oh, if you want to do multi-stage pipelines for the preview. So without that, you can't do multi-stage pipelines. So let's turn this on and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I can actually probably build just fine, to be honest, with that on. We'll test it together. So yeah, so all that is if you don't, actually, so let me show you. You see how you have this pipelines button here? So what Microsoft is doing at this point is you have two different sections. You have your CI, which is what Microsoft categorizes as your build. And then you have your CD, which is what Microsoft categorizes as your delivery, right? A lot of other things like GitLab CI, like Jenkins, they've always had those things together for a long time in something called multi-stage pipelines. Microsoft's implementing this and now, which is why it's still a preview feature. And it, to my knowledge, YAML pipelines in general are actually still in beta. I know that multi-stage pipelines are like still super beta. There's still certain things I can't do, which is why I flip-flop back and forth. So you know how it had the pipelines button there? Let's go back here.
Not to take too much of your time, but if you turn this on, right, basically what you're saying is my CI/CD works from the single trigger, right? So I commit the code and I'm gonna build it and deploy it at the same time, right? In one job.
Exactly. So you would have your trigger, which is say whatever branch you're calling from. And you'll be able to see this in a little bit. I wrote some YAML for this. And then you'll have your steps, which is like your build. So let's say you want to copy, and you want to publish an artifact, right? And then after that is when you have your stages. So your stages would be dev, UAT, prod most likely, and then within your stages, you would have what you're doing with your CD, whether you're deploying to Azure or AWS or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you.
So with that off, though, you're not able to do it. You could still build YAML pipelines, you just can't do like the
I can do the dependencies. You build it and then you deploy it, right?
Exactly. And that's what we're gonna do today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So then remember that button. Now, if I go back here at this point, now it turns into builds. So you have your builds and your releases in two different places. And then with that on, you don't, right? You have them in one place. But we're going to turn this on because I'm actually curious. If this doesn't work, we'll just turn it off. That's fine. So let's go in here. We have our master. Let's confirm that's deleted. Beautiful. Let's go here and we'll go to our pipelines. So we're going to go and we're going to create a new pipeline, right? So to answer, I think your question, right, was where can you pull this from? So you could pull it from Subversion, right, SVN. You could pull it from any other type of Git repository. whether that be GitLab CI, anything like that. Your GitHub is obviously there, Microsoft owns, and then Bitbucket. I don't know if anybody ever used Bitbucket for source control,
We
but I
do.
never have.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, that's interesting. So I've never actually talked to anybody that ever used. I know it's been around forever, like it's been around for a really long time, but I heard it's actually good, but it just didn't gain the traction that it was looking for. But in terms of reliability, I heard it was pretty decent. Cool. So I'm gonna click on Azure repos, right? Because that's where my code is. Go to Microsoft presentation. So at this point, we can either do it in a classic way, which is do it through the UI, but that's boring, right? So we're gonna do it with some code. So we're gonna go to our starter pipeline. Then at this point, it kind of just sets you up with like, I'm sorry, I have to do this because I can't see the full thing. So at this point, it sets you up with just, a standard pipeline, or you can import from an existing Azure YAML pipeline. So what we're gonna do is take this out. Let's take this out. We're going to keep everything else. So what happens when you have multiple branches? This trigger means once you push to master, trigger a build. You can do this with any branch. So I could put testing 1 in here, and anytime I push to testing 1, it'll automatically trigger a build. And that's, of course, true CI. True CI is you write your code, you push, you build without you having to do anything, right? So
Like in Azure, I was wondering all the time, and again, guys, it's just me maybe. Line number 7 has dash, which means that this is a list, right? If it's a list, then theoretically speaking, why would I ever want to do master and let's say, I don't know, like dev, seed, UAT at the same time? Why?
Yeah, so I would say, for example, for me, right? Let's say I'm testing multiple features of a specific application and I have them in different branches. Because remember, your branching structure, anytime that you have a new feature, you should never have 2 features together in the same branch. You should always have, if you have multiple features, each feature or each hot fix or each whatever should always be a different branch. Should always be a different branch. So what I would want to do here is, let's say I'm testing multiple features, but it's coming from the same code base. I could just throw in multiple.
That's a very good explanation because I got stuck in dev, seed, UAT, but you're right. There might be multi-dependencies.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Multiple dependencies, or if, like, let's say, for example, you want to see how my feature works while you're deploying your feature, things like that. Like, so you could deploy 2 different features at the same time. So again, once you get to CD, right, you have these multiple features you're pulling from multiple branches. Now you can deploy both of those features at the same time if you wanted to and see what breaks, right?
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is new and this is super interesting. So YAML is pretty big. I mean, like I personally know that I can't remember every single API call for the copy, for the publishing, for the Jenkins, for AWS. Like I can't remember all of these things, right? So what do? Well, I'm going to click on Show Assistant, and I'm going to go here, and I want to copy some files. All right. So my source folder is going to be, I forget what I called it. Give me 2 seconds. Sorry. Called it Azure DevOps panel. So Azure DevOps panel, right? So now my target folder. So to minimize the confusion of where am I going to put this, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use something called predefined variables. So I go to Google. I'm going to say Azure DevOps predefined variables. All right. So these predefined variables are just built-in special environment variables, right? So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to think about which one I need ultimately, right? And I'm going to go to my build variables, and this is the one that I need. So this is the staging directory, which means just automatically always put it here. Because remember, in the background, when you're doing a build, It's just a container running in the background. So the container's running in the background, it's spinning up, it's doing your build, and then it's spinning down, right? Yeah, please.
Just a question, because your container is Ubuntu, that's what you have with the pipeline. Are you gonna put the C column?
So that's where it's actually going, but that's my build agent. So it's being stored in Azure DevOps land, wherever that may be, in a specific location, and that would be this location.
Are you gonna build it under Ubuntu?
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to be using to kick off my code, but where it's being stored, it's two different places. Yeah, I don't know where that is. That's somewhere in Microsoft land, wherever that may be. Yeah. Oh, the other thing too is to go back to that. If you use multiple different agents, right? Like let's say you can use like the VS Code agent and stuff like that. I've noticed that if I build, let's say like the one that I'm going to build right now, if I build in, let's say the VS 2017 one, it won't work and it'll say that it can't find that agent, but it'll work in the UI. But then if I build in Ubuntu, it'll work just fine. So that's why I usually typically default to Ubuntu right now, because I think there's still some bugs in it, which is, we're going to expect that because it's still in beta. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Where's this? Okay, so I'm going to put my target folder here. So I'm going to wrap this. So what you would see in the UI is essentially the same thing, right? Like you would have your source folder, you would have what contents you want, and then you would have your target folder. The reason why I'm specifying this is because I want to pull everything from that folder, but I could very well do that if I want to, or I could do this, or I could do whatever, right? But what I'm saying here is give me everything, because that's what I need for my build. So now, once I click, sorry?
1 star.
No, 2 stars. Yeah. I don't know why. So once you click add, boom. At that point, it kicks out for me that YAML, right? So I don't have to worry about remembering all of this anymore. That assistant is there. So then, if I do this. Okay, so now what do I want to do? I've copied my files. I went to my repo. I got my code. So now what I need to do is I need to create an artifact out of this code for my deployment. Right.
Are you good with YAML? If we would ask you the question about the YAML, or?
So I worked a lot with Ansible in the past, but that's, well, and like Kubernetes manifests and stuff, but I feel like, and well, Docker Compose files as well, but I feel like YAML, depending on what you're using it for, it's always a little bit different, right? Like you always have your primary things, like where you're putting things, how you're indenting, like you said, lists with hyphens, but everything else is kind of like different, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you have any YAML questions, I'll try to answer them.
Maybe after this session, I don't want to hijack right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. Cool. So the path to publish, right? It's going to be the same thing as my target folder because I want to copy my code there and then I want to build from the same place so I can create the artifacts, right? And then this is just pretty much going to stay defaulted at this point. I'm going to click add, right? So now here's my YAML pipeline. And again, this is super good, right? Because I don't have to worry about remembering all of this all the top of my head. It's not too much, but you can have a huge, especially with stages and stuff, you could have a 100-line YAML file and, you know.
Just curiosity purposes, can you type Terraform there in the task?
Of course.
To see if they have anything?
I think they do, but you have to add the extension. If
You're right, yes.
So like, yeah. Like I ran into this issue the other day where I was trying to do some unit testing with my PowerShell code, and Pester, Pester is the mock testing framework, and it's not added by default. So this extensions definitely exist, but a lot of them you have to add in. And again, for that you have to be, I think you have to be a project administrator. You can't be a standard administrator for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. So then if there's specific variables that you want to pass in, you can as well. I'm not passing in any variables for this. Well, we're passing in the predefined variables, right? But nothing's else specific. Variables are really good for when you have stages. So I'll show you guys when we get this to the CD portion, but you have variables and that's what we're going to use to pass in my web app name. And when you have stages, you have to be able to pass in variables as well. So that's built in. So we'll save and run, right? We're going to commit. So now you have a choice, right? You can either create a new branch or you can commit directly to master, depending on what you want to do. We're feeling daring tonight, so we're going to commit directly to master.
what is CI again?
Continuous integration.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have two portions. You have your continuous integration, which is after, if we push anything to master, it would automatically build. And then that's your CI portion. Your CD portion is delivering your product, shipping your products. Yeah. Yeah.
So CI is more of build and CD is more of release.
Yeah. So CI, I hate to say that it's build because it's technically not build, but when you commit your code, it'll automatically build. So that's your CI portion. And then your CD portion is always just delivering your code to wherever you're pushing it to, whether that be an Azure Function app or a VM or something like that, wherever you're pushing to.
And what if the build fails? I mean, if the kickoff build that happens, right? If it fails, does the get checked in or?
No. So if the build fails for whatever reason, you'll just have to go in and figure out the bug in your code, whether that be syntax, whether it be some sort of NuGet package that didn't get pulled down, like whatever the case may be. Yeah. But and another thing too is, since you bring it up, if your build fails, the artifact won't exist, so you won't be able to do any type of CD with that artifact. Yeah. Cool. So my build passed, right? So yeah, let's just quickly go through this. So what this is doing is it's copying all of my files. Oh, sorry, let me scroll up. And then it's publishing an artifact and it's creating that artifact based on them. And we should be able to go to artifacts. Nope, okay, because I don't have a feed connected, fine. But typically if you had a feed connected, your artifacts would be here. Also, let's say you had something like Nexus, I'm pretty sure you can import those artifacts in as well. All right, so now let's go to our release. So now we're going to create a new release. All right, so let's go through an empty job. Name this dev out. All right, so now we have to pick our artifact. So we have to say, where's our artifact coming from? If you have multiple projects, right, like I have multiple projects in here, I can pick from different artifacts. I can also pick what my source type is. My source type in this case is a build because we did CI. Yeah, sorry. Source pipeline. We can pick whatever version we want, or we can specify it at runtime. So if you want to specify it at runtime, this is super useful if, let's say I built code, right? And then you went and you built from your code on the same branch, the same just build in general, right? But what if I don't want to build something that's in your code, right? Let's say you're on version 1.1 and I want to be on version 1.0 for whatever reason, right? At that point, you can specify at runtime, I want to specify my build. Because if you're working in a big environment, there's builds constantly kicking off all the time. And by the time you kick off something, there's 3 more that were already kicked off. So, but we only have one. So we'll do latest, right? And latest means obviously if you build and then 10 more builds are kicked off after yours, it's going to pick the newest one, not yours. Yeah. So we're going to add that, and that's our artifact. So now at this point in our stage, we're going to pick what we want to do. So we're going to keep the agent standard VS 2017 for our CD process. Can just keep that as a default name. Go up here and we'll say Microsoft panel. All right, and then we're going to click this plus button. And yep, so you have your Terraform stuff here, you have your build and release stuff here.
Mike, I mean, question on that agent, right? Is it an agent linked to an organization, or is it like?
So you have 3 different types of agents. You have one, your Microsoft hosted agents, which are containers in the background and Microsoft's giving them to you. You have your build agents that you can say run on a Windows server or on a Windows desktop. Like at home for testing, right? I have a VM running on my desktop in Hyper-V, and then I just spin up a standard Windows 10 VM. I deploy it as a build agent, and then at that point, once I'm building or deploying code, I can pick it from there. Yeah. So, and it obviously has to have 1, network connectivity to wherever your Azure DevOps is. And then 2, there's, once you add a new agent, it'll give you like a few lines and you'll run those lines on the build agent and then it'll authenticate for you. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. And then the third one is Docker. So you can have Docker agents that run in containers as well. Yeah, which is obviously way more scalable. So the 2 we're going to use Azure resource group deployment. So if you guys remember, I had three sets of code. I had my main template, my ARM template, I had my parameter template, and then I had my C# code. When you build your web app, right? And this is the case for a lot of different things in Azure, where once you say go try to deploy your web app, it'll say, no, this web app doesn't exist, right? So in your CD process, you have to have specific steps that go out, build your web app for you, then have your app deploy to your web app, right? And same thing with like VMs, right? So let's say you need to deploy an IIS cluster, right? You would build your IIS cluster with ARM, and then you would say, maybe have a PowerShell script to go and install IIS for you. Yeah. So the first thing we'll do is we'll add the way to pull ARM templates. We're gonna pick our subscription, right? Arise.
Mike, maybe we can pause here for a second if you don't mind.
Please.
What you've just done, right, is when you did the authorized, you really created the SPN account, source principal name, right?
So I didn't create, I just used existing. So I just used my email. So my email, that one that I just typed in, is what's tied into my Azure portal and what's tied into my Azure DevOps portal. So you just authenticate based on your email, but you could authenticate based on, I think, service accounts and anything in Azure Active Directory.
Right. But right now you authenticated the entire subscription.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you want to be more granular, then you have to really go to the settings, create the SPN as you just mentioned, and just only IAM to that specific resource group.
No, you can even do it even easier. So if you go into Azure Active Directory, right, within Azure Active Directory, you can say, let's say, I want to give Constantine access to just virtual machines.
Okay. Yes.
So, and he can't see anything else. Well, he can probably see stuff, but he can't access it, right? Maybe only read only. So then once he authenticates with his Azure subscription, he'll only be able to deploy to virtual machines because that's all he has access to. But I'm using like this is.
That's even better what you just, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So I can hit pretty much anything in Azure at this point.
Cool.
Yeah. So I would say that's probably the easier way to do it because you don't want to get stuck managing 500 users in Azure DevOps. It doesn't scale, right? So, did you have any other questions?
No, this is good. Awesome. Thank you.
And then at this point, we'll pick my resource group that I want to deploy my web app to. We'll pick our location. Okay, so this is important, right? We want to use our linked artifact, the artifact that we just added in the other process in the pipeline, right? So the first thing we want to specify is we want to specify our main template, right? So we want to specify the main, and then we want to specify our parameters file, and that's why it was important to have that parameters file there. Perfect. That's pretty much it for this one. Now, let's say you want to do, I'm not going to call it unit tests, not even a mock test either, but let's say you want to do a test on your ARM templates to just make sure everything's there, right? So for example, you could try to deploy and my main ARM template doesn't even exist where I specified. So you could do a validation on it, which is like your testing, and then you can have a second task of the same task to do a deployment. Yeah. So that's it for that one. So the second one is, just to actually confirm this real quick. There's multiple.
Yes, so tell me more about this agent. So you just deployed the agent to deploy and run the build. What was just happened?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
You said the agent. What you just did with the artifact?
Oh, so once you do get to your CD process, that's when you decide, okay, what am I doing with my code, right? So the first thing that I did was I specified my ARM templates that I showed because that's what's going to create my web app and my web app service plan.
Right.
And then after that, I'm just checking to just make sure that I'm going to use the right one. So the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to have another task in there that's going to say, okay, now deploy my code to my web app. Yeah.
So the first one go there, agent job, right? So
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So this is just in your CD process. You can just specify what kind of agent you want to be able to use here. So for my build, I used Ubuntu, and then for my deployment, I'm just going to use the VS 2017 one.
So this agent is actually going to run on your Ubuntu service to deploy the IAS.
Not on my Ubuntu server, but whatever Ubuntu server in Microsoft land or
Right,
the
of course,
container
in
rather.
Azure, right.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So yeah, and you can specify different ones, whether it's Ubuntu. You can even specify desktops now. So that's pretty cool. OS X, if you're building iOS apps, you could do that as well. Yeah. So we're going to use the Azure App Service Deploy.
If you're using an agent specification, right, do we need to, I mean, do we run into any firewall issues if it's a, do we need to have anything for, because I remember for our implementation, we had something to do with firewall and somebody had to come in and do like a dynamic register.
So that would be if you're using like the Docker agents, or if you're using the Windows VM agents that you're hosting. So when you're hosting it, of course, like wherever your network is, you need to have network connectivity up to Azure over a specific port. I don't know the specific port off the top of my head because I always use the built-in Microsoft agents, but you would have to have a port open. You would have to have network connectivity to go up, and your firewall would have to have the ability to accept that inbound traffic. If you don't have that, you're not going to be able to build. Well, you may be able to build, but you may not be able to deploy if you're touching that agent versus like, say you're using, so what we're seeing too is you can specify two different agents. So you can specify for my build, I can specify Ubuntu. And then for my deployment, I can specify VS 2017, right? Or Mac OS X or whatever. So depending on where your build is, either it won't build or it won't deploy. It'll be one of those two. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay, cool. Azure App Service Deploy. Now we're going to go here, Azure App Service Deploy. Oh, and also I have like I work in my production-based environments. I have like I could have 20 tasks here if I want to. I don't know off the top of my head if there's a limit to how many tasks you can have, but I personally haven't hit that limit yet.
You're defining a workflow, right? In this, and can we have like approvers, pre-approvers, post-approvers?
Yeah. So what I do is for all of my dev test environments, right? So that would be in different stages. So we only have one stage right now. I could add a new stage and show you. So let's say you have dev test, UAT, and prod, right? For my dev test environments, I always don't put any blockers on it because I don't care who deploys to that. UAT, it depends on what stage UAT is at. And then prod, I always have like somebody on it, whether it's myself, whether it's somebody on my team. So I have a few guys in the US, and if I'm not around and I know people are deploying to prod, I'll have one of them be the approvers, or I'll have like a generic because then that way, once it goes to push out, you'll get an email about it, and you'll say, hey, somebody's trying to push, and until that person approves it, they can't do anything. Yeah.
Nice.
So here again, I'm going to specify my subscription. So here, my app name, right? So at this point, nothing is deployed. There's no web app deployed. So if we go here again, all right, so if we go here, this is my app name, right? But nothing's deployed. So I can't search for this app because it's not there. How would I do it, right? So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to specify a variable at runtime. So we're going to say app name. We're going to go up to our variables, and we're going to add a key value pair in here. So my key is going to be app name, and then my value is going to be my web app. So what will happen is during the deployment, the first thing is it's going to create my web app. After that, it's going to go through and it's going to say, oh, this is my variable. This is the value that points to it, and then it'll be able to deploy. If you don't have something like this in, you either can't deploy or you'll have to specify your app name here, and it already has to be created. Yeah. So, and this is the easy way to get around that, right? Because who wants to go and create a web app and then go into their CI/CD process? That's what this is supposed to be used for. Cool. So that's my variable. I don't have this set up, but something that I want to show. Let me just save this real quick. So you can have variable groups, and variable groups are very, very important in my opinion. So I have deployments depending on the Docker engines that I'm deploying. Because right now I'm managing about 20 different applications that are running in Docker, so 20 different containers. Each one has its own separate deployment. And these deployments consist of API keys. These deployments consist of function keys. These deployments consist of this app needs to talk to this app, so this app needs to have this app's function key, right? And how do you manage that if you have 20 pipelines with 30 different variables? It becomes absolutely impossible. I know because I'm living it right now. So if I go to here and I go to variable groups, right? I can specify a variable group and I can save it. And then at that point, I can have all my variables in there, and then I can call them at each pipeline. So essentially, instead of changing variables in 20 locations, I only have to change variables in one location. Super important, especially if you have 100 plus pipelines, it gets very annoying very fast. So I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go back. Oh, to answer your question, if I go here, right, and I scroll down to pre-deployment approvals, and I put my name in here, right? At that point, anytime that somebody tries to deploy, I must approve first.
And as a tag along to that, Mike, right? Can we also have like a custom script which we can run as part of that step?
So you can have something called gates, and within your gates right now, these are the few things that you can specify in your gates, right? So I haven't done this before, but something that I can think of off the top of my head is I can have an Azure function that can go, and once this goes out and it hits my email, I can have an Azure function say go and approve it for me, so I don't have to go and click stuff. Yeah. Cool. So let me go back to my stages. Go back to here, right? And that should have sent, oh, I'm sorry. Let's specify one thing. We need to specify our application, right? So go back. So this is our package or our folder. This is the place that I'm going to specify my C# code for my web app. So go here, we go to drop, and this is where all my code is. I don't have to worry about the SLN in this portion. I just have to worry about where my code is packaged. All right, so I'm going to specify this. Everything here can be left blank, but like if you want post-deployment actions and stuff like that, like to run a script if you need to, right? Maybe to let everybody know, hey, this has been deployed or something like that, right? So we have our variable here. Let's go ahead and save that. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's look at one more thing, app service types. So we're going to run this on Windows right now, but you can obviously run this in multiple places. Containers are interesting. You can run web apps via containers or via code, and that's super useful. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to save this. I haven't been doing it. I've just been clicking save, but that comment box that pops up, it's super useful because if you have 10 people working on the same thing and there's 30 new saves and nobody knows what anybody did because nobody left a comment, but yeah. Peeve. Variables, our variable is here, right? So now let's hope that this works. We're gonna go here. If you have multiple versions like you were asking for, these versions are actually the versions of your build. Yeah, so you can specify them in here. Cool. So now we're going to create. We're going to go. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I leave gates on? I must have. Let me go back here real quick. Yeah, I think I clicked on it. Turn it off. Let's try that one more time.
So if you have gates enabled, but you don't have any gate on, that is like...
It's going to sit there until time's out for 5 minutes.
Okay, go. So this is the CI part, right?
This is the CD part.
CD part.
Yeah. So I built my package and now I'm ready to ship my product. Yeah. So I'm going to create a release again, and then we're going to go here. So we're queued up, And we're gonna hope that this goes in the way that I'm hoping it's gonna go. And in the meantime,
A quick question. So release is actually your CD part, right?
yeah. So the release section is your CD part. That's where you're shipping your product. Yep. But keep in mind though that Microsoft is switching to CI/CD in one place. So at some point, probably in the near future, once multi-stage pipelines are out of beta, you're just gonna have one location at that point. So which can be a little bit confusing if you're like trying to explain it in a meeting or something like, hey, I'm working on the CI part, but this is also the CD part. Yeah. Sorry. So now, nothing here yet. So now we're at the part where our job initialized, which means like the agent was fine. The artifact is here. It was able to pull our code because remember we turned our code into an artifact. So now at this point, it's going to go out and it's going to create our resource, hopefully, and then it's going to deploy our app.
Able to look at deployments on the resource.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So if I go to resource groups, I can go to development. I can see that this is currently deploying. So our app service plan was created. Now we have to wait for our web app. Here.
Is there a way, Mike, we can access the build logs and the deployment logs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So once this is deployed, we'll be able to see some logs here. So like, let's say we want to see our web app. We go to operation details. It's not going to tell us too much, but when it fails, there's a lot. Yeah. It's very good at telling you that it failed. So if I go to app services, now my web app is here. All right, so let's go back. This is still, oh yeah, here we go. So now we're at the point where our web app is actually being deployed. Let's hope that my C# code is correct.
Is that going to show up as a separate deployment under resource group or?
No, so this is another pet peeve of mine. Let's go back to resource groups. Go to development. Let's go here, right? So it won't show you in the resource group your app being deployed. It will only show you in the resource group the infrastructure being deployed.
That makes some sense.
No.
Some sense.
I wish that there was a place that I could see like, hey, my app's dying in a fire right now, but I can't. Okay, cool. So everything was successful. So if I go here, we're actually not going to see anything because, again, this was like just like a boiler template. It wasn't anything specific. Like I didn't create a pretty front end or anything. But here's my URL. And if I go here, and go up, it's going to probably tell me access denied. Yep. But that's our web app running. Yeah. So we go back. We can see our configuration, we can see our authorization, all of these things. I don't think there's a way to actually see the true app running, but I mean, yeah, we can obviously see it's running. And then if we wanted to, we could look at application insights if it was actually connected to anything at that point. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I had for you guys. So if you guys have any questions or...
Yeah, so Michael, so you added this agent, you added another second thing to deploy app, right? If you go back to the screen.
Sure.
What would I need if I have like a virtual machine on Azure and I have an AD and do some automation, like, check for, AD computer related identity stuff? What do I need, like an agent or something to connect to the specific VM? Do I need the agent?
Yeah, so let's say you want to take a PowerShell example?
Yeah, sure,
Yeah?
absolutely.
Perfect. So now if I go back here, I go to my tasks, all right, and I go here. So at this point, you can still use the same VS 2017 agent because it works fine with PowerShell. So there are multiple different tasks for PowerShell. The one that I was thinking of is PowerShell on target machines.
Yeah.
So here you can specify your machines in a list. I think it's comma separated if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can do that. Pick username, your password, and then whatever your script is. So you can have two different things. You can either have inline scripts, which I personally don't like inline scripts because anybody can come in here and edit this and no one will know until they deploy it, right? So again, that goes back to like there's no source control, right? So if I go here and I go to my file path, at this point I can specify like where my code actually lives. There are some other tasks. I think that's probably like the easiest one to use on specific machines, but you can run PowerShell, anywhere if you wanted to specify your script path and your arguments and stuff like that. And then at this point, what will happen is this will run in Azure DevOps. It won't run like on a specific machine or anything like that. Yeah, it'll just run, in the background. So like if you want to go out and get services on a machine or something like that.
Go out and check for accounts, enable, check for services.
Exactly.
You can do all of this for this. You need this agent code.
Yeah.
Shell script. Okay.
Yep. So this would be more of like. So the first one would be more of like if you want to go out and you want to check like user permissions and stuff or whatever on a domain controller, right, specifying a specific machine. This would be more of, say, if you have some sort of API written in PowerShell and you want to go contact something outside that, it's not a specific machine, it's just either something open or something that you're specifying arguments or credentials at runtime. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Mike, I have a question regarding this PowerShell script and file path. If your file is in Azure repos, I actually could not find what is the raw path to the repos, like, you can do in GitHub, for example.
Oh, so to be able to do that, let's go back to our pipelines. All right, let's do a new pipeline. All right, so here is where you would have to specify where your code is. So what's going to happen is wherever your code is, it's going to go out to that location. It's going to take the code and then it's going to build an artifact out of that code. Now, if we go to releases, for example, right, and we go back here and we edit, we go to tasks. Right? Go here. This is the build location, and this is the drop. The drop is where your artifacts actually exist. So now there could be two things that could be wrong. One, you may not be specifying GitHub and your credentials. I don't know if it's connected or not. Two, remember how I was showing you guys in the build that you can do content type ***, or you can specify like a certain file type? You may not have specified the file type that you're looking for. If you didn't, even though you ran it against the specific directory where your code is, it won't pick up that file.
No, what I meant with the PowerShell is, let's say I have a PowerShell script that building multiple, let's say VNets or whatever. And this PowerShell script is in Azure DevOps. Now, with GitHub, if I'm on GitHub, I actually can go and see the raw path to this PowerShell script. I just can copy and paste when I add task, PowerShell task, let's say, as an agent job. But I could not find actually this raw path in Azure repos.
In Azure repos?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. So you're saying like when you go to the code, right, in GitHub, and it's like GitHub.
Right, there is a raw path to the code,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I could not find the same in Azure DevOps.
Yeah, there's no specific URLs in Azure DevOps.
So is it even possible to? I mean, is there any way to find it?
I've never personally seen it before. I know that it's kind of annoying because I can't take that code path and go run it someplace else. I think I don't know why they don't have a specific URL. What you could do is, if you're familiar with APIs, there's a REST API. I think it's on version 5.1 right now for Azure DevOps, and there is a specific API call for a get and a post for Azure repos. So you could probably go there, pull the path, and then you would be able to see the actual like full path at that point. In terms of the UI, to my knowledge, there isn't a way to actually see that.
Yeah, actually, I saw that it can be done with the API request to find this path, but I actually, for some reason, didn't work for me. I couldn't actually. I mean, this API request didn't work. But okay.
Let's see if we can find a. Yep.
I had a really silly solution for that. I pushed the PowerShell to Azure Storage first.
Yeah, that's a good solution. If you have a storage
Yeah,
account,
but you
at
need to
public,
pay for
you can do
the
that.
Azure storage, right? Where you don't need to
Yeah.
pay anything for Azure DevOps.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. There's not free storage accounts.
Yeah, I know. I'm just, you know.
So, as a matter of principle, yes, but
Yeah, so this would probably be the one you're looking for. Blobs, trees, commits, references. So you might be able to get something based on a reference. Let's see. Get deleted repository. Yeah, get repository. Yeah, so this may work for you.
Yeah, that's what I tried actually, but for some reason, I don't know, this get command didn't work for me.
Oh no, so the get is just specifying the API call itself. So you'll have certain get requests like gets and posts and options and deletes. Those are just your API calls depending on what you're trying to do. So what you'll need to do for this is you'll either have to curl it if you're using like Linux, or if you're more comfortable with Bash, you'll either have to curl this URL with, of course, like your organization and stuff in here, or you'll have to do an invoke web request or an invoke REST method in PowerShell. And then there's also other ways to do it in like Python and stuff as well. You can curl in Python or use the specific HTTP request libraries, just to give examples. But yeah, so this actually won't work. Like you'll have to just copy this and you'll have to make that API call.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you did something like, just to show you, I think we're okay on time. Let me know when you want me to stop talking. So if you did like invoke web request, then you did URI, and then you did method get. Let's do method get, or you could do a post. A post is like if you're trying to write something, but a get is just retrieving information. And then you do your URI, and then at that point, let's delete that get out of there. Right, and then you would run it like that. The other options you have is these are your URI parameters. So if you want to specify a specific parameter like a project, you would come here and then you would have like / project and then whatever your project ID is. So you can specify your parameters in that fashion. Yeah, but you pretty much probably.
I got the point. Yeah, I'll play with it. Thanks.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I personally like invoke REST method a little bit more. I feel like the objects that get returned to you in PowerShell are a little bit more verbose for whatever reason. I don't know which one is newer or which one is older personally, but yeah, that's the one that I personally like a little bit more.
I mean, this is more a philosophical question, right? I mean, we were getting into a debate earlier in this week with some folks how we design an organization and a project and teams. So, I mean, do you recommend having multiple organizations or one organization, multiple projects, or?
So repeat the questions for the group.
Yeah. So the question was kind of from a philosophy perspective and from an architectural perspective. If I'm looking at like organizations and projects and teams, do I want to have one organization? Do I want to have multiple organizations and stuff like that? So the answer is, it's not the answer you're probably looking for, but it depends on your
organization, right?
So for example,
take example DevOps. You're part of the DevOps team, right? How does your organization set up?
Yep. So what we have is we have one organization, right? So I work for a company called PointsBet. We have one organization, right? It's called PointsBet. And then within our organization, we have multiple projects, right? So our projects are for the IT team if they write code, or for overall code for the entire organization, or we'll have software development projects, right? So all of my code goes into the software development project, and then at that point you can specify who has access to each project. So like I don't have access to the IT project, as I shouldn't because I'm not IT, right? And they don't have access to the DevOps project, as they shouldn't because they're not in software development. But you can be granular with that. In terms of multiple organizations, if it was a global company, right, and you had like either child companies or anything like that, that's when I would create multiple organizations. I think about it like from an AD perspective, right? So if I have one forest, right, and I have multiple domains within that forest, I would split it up the same way. I would only have multiple domains within the forest probably if it's multiple different organizations or child organizations, right? Same thing goes for the Azure DevOps philosophy.
And in terms of cross-pollination, if you want to cross-pollinate between teams, will the multiple project, one organization, multiple project works better than?
Yeah, so in terms of working better, I personally like one organization and multiple projects because it's just, so here's the thing, right? If you have multiple projects from a security perspective, you can specify who sees what. If you have multiple organizations, it's like, kind of overkill in my mind. I would rather just have one organization, unless there's some sort of like compliance issue with this, right? Where you need to have multiple organizations because maybe a child company is in some country that they can't see this code or whatever the case may be, right? Like I would say it really depends on that. In terms of, from a security perspective, just have multiple projects. If you want people to say like see two different projects, as you saw when I was doing the build, like you can see multiple different projects if you want to, and all that. So yeah, I would say one organization, multiple projects. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Can I ask you one last question?
Please.
If you have, let's say, customer DevOps and you have your own internal team DevOps, and you want to, have a template for, let's say, testing, test cases, validating the service accounts, blah, blah, blah. So is there a way to, this is for test cases, I know any of you can answer. Can the way to build, test cases and all of this and then easily clone from one environment to another? How do you copy, basically? Which is set up?
Yeah, let me show you. So in terms of cloning, I spent about a day and a half writing an API that could do this for me. Now, the problem with this button is if you follow the API calls, it's actually not an API that's open. So if you want to do this, like if you want to clone multiple releases, let's say like for test cases and for different people, you can, but there's no easy way to do it. You have to go in here and you have to click this button, or you can export, and then you can export, and then you can put, you can import that into like a different project if you want to. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Can I ask a question, maybe like in the same regards? What about the DevOps generator? If I want to generate the entire organization. Have you played with this? Because it's been recently publicly released.
Yeah.
I have not touched it myself too.
You're saying like, let's say I want to like deploy multiple products or organizations at the same time?
There's the same security, so you have some kind of a baseline, and you can just distribute it to different organizations or projects.
I personally haven't played with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't answer that question. Is it like, is that a public feature right now?
Right. Yeah, it's been publicly released.
Yeah. So I know that if I go to my organization settings, my users, billing, like auditing, all of that stuff in here, even Azure Active Directory, right? Security policies and all of that. I know I can do that in here for all of my projects, but I haven't ever seen a way to specify like the organization settings in one place for multiple organizations. Yeah, that I haven't seen.
Mike?
Yeah.
Hopefully you're going to get back to us on that. I'm going to give you the link.
Yeah, please.
As a homework.
Send it over.
I'm kidding, man. Thank you.
Do you need to connect your Active Directory over there?
I'm sorry?
Do you need to connect your Azure Active Directory to...
For your organization, yeah. I don't know if I have...
To run all of
the
I
information,
do. Besides the agent, you need to connect your Azure Active Directory over here.
Yeah, so connecting the Azure Active Directory, this would be more for like your users and your groups and stuff like that to make sure that people can, time, we're running out of time?
Oh, we gotta get out of here, okay.
Okay, yeah. So,
You're
yeah.
kicking us out.
Yeah.
Recording?
Yes,
Stop
so
recording?
yes,
Okay.
we're gonna stop the recording. Mhm. Yes, let's stop the